Listen carefully. This is not ordinary motivation. This is a moment of alignment. This is a divine interruption to lack, delay, and limitation. Right now, something is shifting in the unseen realm on your behalf. The doors that were closed are beginning to respond. The resistance you felt is losing its grip. You are not here by accident. You are here because heaven has scheduled your breakthrough and your spirit is ready to receive it. Today, we speak to financial pressure and command it to release its hold. We speak to debt and declare its expiration date. We speak to scarcity and cancel its assignment. You were not created to struggle endlessly. You were created to dominate, to steward abundance, to walk in overflow with wisdom and purpose. Your hands were designed to build. Your mind was designed to strategize. Your life was designed to prosper. Now breathe and focus. As you listen, allow every word to recalibrate your faith. Let hope rise again. Let expectation awaken, because what you are about to hear is not just words, it is activation. I decree that every delayed payment is being accelerated. Every blocked channel of income is opening. Every contract that belongs to you is locating you now. Opportunities you did not apply for are searching for you. Favor is speaking your name in rooms you've never entered. Resources are being reassigned. Help is being released. Support is showing up at the right time. I declare that your ideas will produce wealth. Your skills will create income. Your consistency will command results. The confusion around money is lifting and clarity is replacing it. You will know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. The fear of not having enough is breaking, and bold faith is rising within you. From this moment forward, money will no longer control your emotions. You will control money with discipline, vision, and purpose. You will attract the right partnerships, the right clients, the right decisions. Waste is being exposed and eliminated. Wisdom is taking its place. You will not miss opportunities meant for you. I speak to your bank accounts. Be replenished. I speak to your business. Expand. I speak to your career. Advance. I speak to your household. Experience peace and provision. What was once barely enough will now overflow. What once took months will now happen suddenly. What once felt impossible will become your testimony. Let this prayer sink deep. Listen again and again. Each time you listen, your faith strengthens, your mindset aligns, and your atmosphere changes. Expect movement, expect calls, expect ideas, expect solutions. Now rise with confidence. Take action with faith. Speak abundance daily. Act as one who believes. Share this prayer. Listen to it 3 times and walk forward, knowing that a financial miracle is already in motion, waiting for your next step. The message centers on the understanding that financial transformation does not begin with effort alone, but with alignment at a deeper spiritual level. It emphasizes that nothing meaningful shifts externally until something first shifts internally. When a person becomes aligned in faith, expectation, and awareness, circumstances begin to rearrange themselves naturally. This alignment is not passive. It is an intentional positioning of the heart and mind to receive what has already been prepared. The speech conveys that breakthroughs are not random events, but appointed moments that require readiness, sensitivity, and obedience to recognize and receive them. A major emphasis is placed on the unseen realm, suggesting that many financial delays are not merely practical issues, but spiritual resistance that must be addressed through focus and belief. When the listener chooses to engage intentionally by listening, believing, and staying present, they activate forces beyond logic and limitation. The speech teaches that attention itself is powerful, and that listening with faith creates an atmosphere where obstacles lose authority. This activation is portrayed as immediate, not gradual, reinforcing the idea that alignment can produce sudden change. The content also highlights identity as a critical component of alignment. The listener is reminded that they were not designed for endless struggle, survival, or insufficiency. Instead, they were created with purpose, capacity, and authority. By embracing this identity, the listener stops negotiating with lack and begins to expect provision. Alignment occurs when self-perception matches divine intention, and this shift allows the individual to approach finances with confidence rather than desperation. Another important aspect of this point is the idea of timing. The speech repeatedly implies that the listener is encountering the message at the exact moment they are ready to receive it. This reinforces trust in divine scheduling and removes frustration caused by past delays. Rather than focusing on what did not work before, the listener is encouraged to believe that readiness has now met opportunity. This mindset reduces doubt and strengthens patience, allowing faith to remain steady even before visible results appear. The activation described is not emotional hype, but spiritual awareness. The listener is guided to become conscious of what is already moving on their behalf. This awareness sharpens discernment, making it easier to recognize opportunities, ideas, and connections that were previously overlooked. Alignment, therefore, becomes both spiritual and practical, influencing decisions, reactions, and expectations in everyday financial matters. Finally, the point reinforces that alignment must be maintained, not just achieved once. By choosing to listen repeatedly and remain mentally engaged, the listener continually reinforces their faith posture. Each moment of focused listening strengthens belief, dissolves resistance, and deepens readiness to receive, making the financial breakthrough not only possible, but inevitable. The message strongly confronts the cycle of lack and financial pressure by redefining it as a condition that can be broken rather than a permanent reality that must be endured. It emphasizes that struggle is not an identity and debt is not a destiny. Financial pressure is presented as an imposed weight that can be lifted, not a lifelong sentence. By addressing lack directly, the speech challenges the listener to stop normalizing stress, fear, and insufficiency as unavoidable parts of life, and instead recognize them as patterns that can be interrupted and dismantled. A key focus is the psychological impact of financial pressure and how it silently shapes decisions, emotions, and self-worth. The content highlights how constant worry about money drains energy, clouds judgment, and limits vision. When a person lives under continuous pressure, they begin to think defensively rather than creatively, making choices based on survival instead of growth. The speech calls for a conscious break from this mindset, encouraging the listener to believe that peace and provision can coexist even before full financial freedom is visible. The language used in the message treats lack as something that has an assignment, a duration, and an endpoint. This framing empowers the listener by implying that scarcity operates under limits and authority rather than absolute control. When lack is no longer seen as endless, hope is restored. The listener is guided to expect release, not just relief, and to believe that pressure can be completely removed rather than merely managed. This shift from coping to overcoming is central to breaking the cycle. Another important aspect is the cancellation of accumulated burdens such as debt, overdue obligations, and delayed income. The speech reinforces the idea that these burdens do not define the future and can be reversed through alignment, wisdom, and faith. It encourages the listener to stop replaying past financial mistakes and instead focus on present clarity. Shame and regret are identified as hidden chains that keep pressure active, and releasing them is presented as a necessary step toward freedom. The content also emphasizes emotional restoration as part of financial breakthrough. Breaking lack is not only about numbers changing, but about fear losing its grip. The listener is encouraged to imagine a life where money no longer dictates mood, peace, or confidence. This internal freedom is portrayed as the foundation upon which external provision is built, allowing the listener to make healthier decisions and recognize opportunities without panic or doubt. Throughout this point, the message reinforces that financial pressure does not have the final word. By shifting belief, expectations, and emotional responses, the listener steps out of a reactive cycle and into a position of authority. This internal repositioning disrupts long-standing patterns of insufficiency and creates space for stability, increase, and lasting financial peace. The message places strong emphasis on the authority released through spoken words, teaching that declarations are not symbolic expressions, but active instruments that shape reality. It communicates that speech is not neutral. Every word carries direction, intention, and power. When spoken with belief and clarity, words become commands that influence both mindset and circumstance. The listener is encouraged to move away from passive hope and into intentional declaration, understanding that silence often allows limitation to persist while faith-filled speech interrupts it. The content reinforces that many financial struggles remain active, not because solutions are unavailable, but because the environment has been shaped by negative or fearful language. Repeated statements of lack, stress, and impossibility reinforce internal resistance and external delay. The speech challenges the listener to recognize how often they unknowingly speak against their own progress. By replacing complaint with declaration, the listener begins to change the atmosphere surrounding their finances. Declarations are presented as acts of authority rather than emotional affirmations. The listener is taught to speak directly to delay, debt, confusion, and stagnation, addressing them as conditions that must respond. This approach shifts the listener from a position of waiting to a position of command. Instead of asking when things will change, they begin declaring that change is already in motion. This transition builds confidence and reinforces belief in personal agency guided by faith. Another key element is consistency. The message implies that a single declaration is powerful, but repeated declarations establish dominance over opposing patterns. Just as negative cycles are reinforced over time, positive outcomes are strengthened through continual verbal alignment. Each spoken word reinforces belief, and belief fuels expectation. Over time, this practice reshapes thought patterns, emotional responses, and decision-making behavior related to finances. The speech also highlights alignment between words and actions. Declarations are not empty statements disconnected from reality. They are meant to guide behavior. When a person declares abundance, they begin to act with wisdom. When they declare clarity, they begin to make intentional decisions. Spoken faith becomes a framework for disciplined action, reinforcing the idea that authority through words must be supported by responsibility and awareness. Additionally, the message emphasizes that declarations impact both the speaker and the listener. Speaking words of authority strengthens internal confidence while also influencing external opportunities. Conversations change, attitudes shift, expectations rise. The listener begins to notice that people respond differently, opportunities appear more clearly, and fear loses influence. This is portrayed not as coincidence, but as the natural result of an atmosphere shaped by intentional speech. By teaching the listener to speak life, order, and increase, the content empowers them to take ownership of their financial narrative. Instead of repeating past limitations, they begin declaring future outcomes, training their mind to agree with possibility rather than restriction, and conditioning their environment to respond to confidence, clarity, and expectation through consistent, deliberate spoken faith. The message presents opportunities, favor, and resources as active forces rather than distant possibilities, shifting the listener's perspective from waiting to awareness. Instead of viewing financial increase as something that must be chased, the content reframes it as something already in motion and searching for alignment. This mindset removes desperation and replaces it with expectancy, teaching that when internal readiness meets external timing, connection becomes inevitable. inevitable, the listener is encouraged to believe that what they need is not lost, delayed, or denied, but strategically positioned. A strong emphasis is placed on the idea that favor operates beyond qualification alone. While effort and skill are important, the speech highlights that certain doors open through alignment rather than merit. This challenges the belief that progress is always slow or earned through exhaustion. Favor is described as influence that accelerates results, bringing access to conversations, decisions, and opportunities that would otherwise remain unreachable. This understanding restores hope for those who have worked hard yet seen little movement. The content also draws attention to unexpected channels of provision. The listener is guided to release narrow expectations about how financial increase must arrive. Instead of limiting belief to familiar income sources, they are encouraged to remain open to new connections, creative ideas, and unconventional opportunities. This openness sharpens perception, allowing the listener to recognize value in places previously overlooked. By removing rigid assumptions, the mind becomes more flexible and receptive to expansion. Another important aspect is timing and recognition. Opportunities are portrayed as present but often unrecognized due to distraction, fear, or self-doubt. The message emphasizes the importance of discernment and attentiveness, suggesting that alignment increases sensitivity to moments that matter. When confidence replaces hesitation, the listener becomes more willing to act quickly and decisively, positioning themselves to benefit from opportunities that require readiness rather than perfection. The activation of resources is also linked to relationships. The speech highlights how support, mentorship, partnerships, and collaboration play critical roles in financial breakthrough. It encourages the listener to value connection over isolation, understanding that resources often flow through people. Pride, fear of rejection, or past disappointment are identified as barriers that block access to help. By remaining open and humble, the listener allows assistance to reach them naturally. Throughout this point, the message reinforces that opportunity responds to expectation. When the listener believes that doors are opening, they begin to carry themselves differently. Their confidence communicates readiness. Their words attract interest. Their actions signal preparation. This internal posture creates an external response, drawing favor, assistance, and resources into their path. What once felt hidden begins to surface, and what once felt distant becomes accessible as alignment turns expectation into connection. The message places strong focus on the internal shift required to move from fear-driven financial behavior to a mindset rooted in clarity, confidence, and wisdom. It acknowledges that many financial struggles persist not because of a lack of income, but because fear silently governs decisions. Fear causes hesitation, impulsive choices, avoidance, and emotional reactions that undermine stability. The speech challenges the listener to recognize how deeply fear has influenced their relationship with money and invites them to release control to a more disciplined and intentional way of thinking. A central idea is that confusion around finances is not permanent and does not reflect intelligence or capability. Confusion is portrayed as a temporary state that lifts when clarity is welcomed. The message encourages the listener to stop labeling themselves as bad with money and instead adopt the belief that understanding and order are accessible. This shift in self-perception is critical because people manage money according to how capable they believe they are. When confidence replaces self-doubt, learning, planning, and improvement become natural rather than intimidating. The content also emphasizes emotional discipline as a form of financial wisdom. It highlights how emotional spending, panic decisions, and stress-based reactions sabotage long-term growth. By learning to pause, reflect, and respond rather than react, the listener gains control over outcomes. This emotional maturity is framed as a sign of financial authority, allowing the listener to protect resources, identify priorities, and avoid unnecessary losses. Another key aspect is the connection between peace and prosperity. The message suggests that abundance cannot be sustained in an atmosphere of anxiety. When the mind is constantly under pressure, it becomes difficult to recognize opportunities or manage growth effectively. By cultivating inner peace, the listener creates space for strategic thinking, creative ideas, and thoughtful decision-making. Peace becomes a stabilizing force that supports consistency and long-term success. The speech also addresses stewardship, reinforcing that financial miracles require responsibility to last. Wisdom is presented as the ability to manage increase without fear, pride, or recklessness. The listener is encouraged to see money as a tool rather than a source of identity or security. This perspective prevents both obsession and avoidance, allowing finances to be handled with balance and purpose. Finally, the message reinforces that a transformed mindset produces lasting results. When fear loses influence and wisdom takes its place, habits change naturally. The listener becomes more intentional, more confident, and more aware. This internal transformation ensures that financial progress is not temporary, but sustainable, supported by discipline, clarity, and a mindset that aligns confidence with responsibility and vision. The message strongly emphasizes that belief alone is not enough without corresponding action, teaching that faith becomes complete when it is expressed through consistent behavior. The listener is encouraged to move beyond passive listening and into intentional engagement, understanding that repetition, discipline, and follow-through are essential for lasting results. By listening multiple times, the message becomes internalized, shifting thoughts, expectations, and reactions until belief feels natural rather than forced. A major focus is placed on consistency as a form of alignment. Just as negative patterns are formed through repeated exposure to fear and doubt, positive patterns are established through continual reinforcement of truth and expectation. The speech frames repeated listening not as ritual, but as reconditioning the mind and strengthening focus. Each repetition deepens conviction, quiets uncertainty, and sharpens awareness of opportunities already present. The content also highlights that faith-based action is practical, not abstract. The listener is encouraged to take tangible steps that match their declarations, such as making intentional decisions, organizing finances, pursuing opportunities, and acting on ideas without hesitation. Action is portrayed as proof of belief, signaling readiness for increase. When action aligns with expectation, progress accelerates and momentum builds. Another important element is confidence in timing. The message teaches the listener to act without anxiety or urgency rooted in fear. Faith-based action is calm, deliberate, and grounded in trust. This prevents burnout and impulsive decisions while allowing steady movement forward. The listener learns to distinguish between pressure-driven action and purpose-driven action, choosing the latter as a sustainable path to growth. The speech also encourages visible expression of belief. Sharing the message, speaking declarations aloud, and openly expecting results are described as ways of reinforcing faith externally. When belief is expressed publicly, it strengthens commitment and accountability. This outward expression aligns the listener's environment with their internal expectation, making belief more tangible and active. Finally, the message reinforces ownership of the process. The listener is reminded that while assistance, favor, and opportunity may come from external sources, responsibility remains personal. Engaging fully, staying consistent, and responding wisely to opportunities ensures that faith produces measurable outcomes. This balance between belief and action positions the listener to experience transformation that is not accidental but intentional, supported by disciplined faith, consistent engagement, and purposeful movement toward financial change.